After working with over 100 retirees, I noticed a pattern. And it wasn't just about money. It wasn't about account balances or investments or tax brackets or anything like that, really. I mean, really, the biggest things that they wanted to talk about were the things that they couldn't get back. It was things like time, energy, moments, right? And so over and over, I heard the same three words. I wish I had something, whatever that something was. And so today I want to share the most common I wish I had stories that I've heard and the lessons behind them so that you can make better choices before it's too late. And to kind of kick this off, I'll never forget what one client told me. He said, I spent 40 years taking care of my finances and almost no time taking care of my body. And by the time he was really ready, he was ready to finally enjoy life. His body said, nope, not anymore. He had the money, he had the plan, he had the freedom. Financially, he was in really good shape. But health wise, his knees were gone, his energy was shot, and travel to him felt more exhausting than it actually felt exciting. What I have found over the years is that many retirees ignore their health. Oftentimes it's like in their 50s, because work starts to take priority. Some have moved up the chain, maybe into higher management positions or whatever it might be. And now as a result, it's a more demanding position, perhaps a lot more travel involved or just more hours. And so now, you're in your 50s, got a little less energy, than you did when you were in your 20s, 30s. And so you put a lot of emphasis and time and energy into work, and then that can cause the health to kind of go by the wayside. It's easy to assume that I'll just get serious about that once I retire, but sometimes it's too late. And so I encourage you, think about your health as a retirement asset, just like your savings. You want the money to help support the life that you want to live, but your health is also so important because it's what allows you to actually be able to do and to enjoy the things that you really want to do. What's the point of saving for a full life if your body won't let you live it? But even when health isn't the issue, there's something else that I hear just as often. And it's not about the money or the travel or the schedule. It's about how fear held them back for years. So many people that I talk to, they didn't just save money, they hoarded it. And not out of greed, but out of fear. It's the fear of running out of money, the fear of a market crash, the fear of maybe just making a wrong move. And so they waited. And I believe that this fear, it often masks itself as responsibility. Many people say no to joy or to new experiences, just to keep their accounts untouched. It feels safer. Ask yourself, are you managing risk or are you going too far perhaps in letting fear make your choices? Fear, it rarely protects your future, but it's excellent at stealing your present. And, that fear, it leads straight into the next regret because what starts as caution often ends in years lost and in a dream retirement that came too late. This might be the most common one of all, and that is that I wish I had retired sooner. Not because people don't love their work, but because they didn't realize really how short the good years would be. Most people assume retirement is just kind of one long chapter, but really it's three. And you might have heard this before, right? You've got the go years where those are the early years of retirement. You typically have the most energy, typically in the best health. You have the most excitement. You have all this time now on your hands now that you're retired, to do the things that maybe are on your bucket list, things that you want to be able to do. And then you have the slow go years, life slows down a bit. And then the no go years where really, your health dictates everything at that point. The biggest regret, at least that I hear, is that I use my go years at my desk or something like that. I was talking to one guy recently, in fact, and we were taking a look at his situation and, he thought he had to continue to work quite a bit longer. I was telling him, no, you could retire quite a bit sooner. And we ended up just kind of breaking down the numbers. And at one point he was kind of looking at his gross income. And I said, look, remember, in retirement, you're not going to be paying FICA taxes. You're not going to be contributing to your 401k. right? All these different deductions that you have, you're not going to be doing that in retirement. And the other thing is that, even after those deductions, then all that's subject to ordinary income tax, right? Federal tax and then state tax if you're in a state that where there is state tax, right? So you've got all that. I said, but in retirement, the name of the game's different. So what we really want to be looking at is your net, your after-tax income. And so, like in his situation, he actually had some money in a Roth. He had a good amount of money in a taxable account with a pretty high cost basis. And so, without getting into details there, I mean, what that basically means is that he could withdraw a good amount of money without having to pay any taxes, also be able to manage long-term capital gains, which are lower than short-term capital gains rates, things like that. So in other words, we can manage your after-tax income, and then also Social Security is more tax advantage. So anyways, we got into all those different things, and it was just it's a good example of I do find that a lot of people can retire earlier than they're thinking. Let me share another story here with you. Now, these are not their real names, but I'm going to call them Bob and Sue. And these were two wonderful people that I had the privilege of working with. They had saved well, I mean, well over $1 million. They had no debt. Their numbers looked great. I mean, financially, they were in really good shape. And their dream is that they wanted to go on this big 6-week trip throughout Europe right after Bob had retired. They wanted to go to Italy, Spain. I know there's some other countries, but I don't remember. It was something that they had wanted to do for years. And so I ran the numbers. I told them, I mean, you can retire now. And, Bob hesitated. He said, let's just wait one more year. And that year turned into 2, and then 3. And then Bob had a stroke. And he survived, but his mobility was never the same. And that trip to Europe, it's still on the vision board, so to speak. Sue later said something that really stuck with me. She said, we saved all this money for someday, and now someday is gone. So what are the 3 most common I wish I had stories that I hear? I wish I had taken care of my health sooner. I wish I had lived with less fear. And I wish I had retired earlier. The word that keeps coming up is delay. Delaying the workout, delaying the trip, delaying the decision until that window quietly closes. So what can we do? Right? Prioritize your health now. I mean, it's as important as your portfolio. Don't let fear drive your financial decisions. Use facts, not feelings, and get a plan that shows you what's possible, not just what to worry about. The most heartbreaking things that I hear in retirement conversations, they're not about money. They're about time that can't be recovered. They're about moments missed, about memories delayed, and energy that never came back. And almost every time, the regret comes down to this: I waited too long. If you're in your 50s or 60s and you're wondering, when should I retire? Should I retire? Right? Start asking some deeper questions. Are you healthy now? Do your numbers actually work? Or are you holding off maybe just because of fear or because of facts? And if you want help answering those questions, I've added a link below where you can learn more about the process that I take in working with people and how you can schedule a free retirement strategy call with me. We'll go through your lifestyle goals, your plan, and your timeline so that you don't have to guess, and also so that you don't have to have regret. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.